At 4ZZZ, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we broadcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people. We acknowledge that their sovereignty over this land was never ceded.
And we stand in solidarity with them.
You're listening to Tranzmission on 4ZZZ, amplifying the trans and gender non-conforming voices of Brisbane and beyond.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bette. My pronouns are she, they, and you're listening to Tranzmission, the trans show on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. I have two people in the studio with me today.
Good morning, my name is Liz Witt. I have they, them pronouns, and it is a joy to join you in the studio today.
Hello, my name is Ludo. I have he, ze pronouns, and I'm also very happy to be here.
Okay, great. I've got a couple of community announcements. So the New Farm Queer Film Festival returns this month with their biggest and best program yet, apparently. So we have a giveaway.
We do. We are giving away not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 double passes to the New Farm Queer Film Festival for people who want to get in a little slice of queer cinema into their lives. Now,
awesome. So all they need to do is
number
text
one,
us, yeah?
subscribe to 4ZZZ, as this competition is only available to 4ZZZ subscribers. So once you have subscribed at 4zzz.org.au, send us a text message on the text line, and the first 5 people who text in saying, shall we make them jump through a hoop for us? The first 5 people who text in their pronouns.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Will get a double pass to the New Farm Queer Film Festival. How's that?
Yep, sounds great. And I'm supposed to alert people to a couple of great films that are going on, so I will do that now. The People's Joker is showing. This autobiographical trans coming-of-age tale skews the Joker into a queer icon. With legal support in tow, director Vera Drew finally presents her much-anticipated directorial debut 2 years after it was pulled from the Toronto International Film Festival under pressure from Warner Brothers. The People's Joker follows an unconfident, closeted trans girl. And then my text cuts off there. So
she moves to Gotham City.
Yeah.
So I can see why Warner Brothers was getting a little itchy there. Can you? So she moves to Gotham City, and then I can kind of guess the rest of the plot from there, considering the name.
I think she's on the Comedy Network or something, isn't she? She's a comedian.
A government-sanctioned late-night sketch show in a world where comedy has been outlawed.
Right, okay, cool.
Hell of a premise.
And so then the other film is called Crossing. Leah, a mesmerising Mzia Arabuli, a retired teacher living in Georgia, made a promise to find out what happened to her long-lost niece, Tekla. When Leah learns from Archie, a neighbour, that Tekla might be living in Turkey, they set off together to find her. In Istanbul, they discover a beautiful city full of connections and possibilities, but looking for someone who never intended to be found is harder than they thought.
Intriguing. So once again, send a text in 0420 626 733 if you would like to get your hands on a double pass to the New Farm Queer Film Festival. Tell us your pros.
Yeah, Brones, I like that. Yeah, that's what we're going with. I also have a little bit of news. I'm always on about the cast review, so I'll just give you all a quick update. The British Medical Association, which was widely criticised in the UK press for rejecting the findings of the CAS review, has voted to retain a neutral position on the review's recommendations while undertaking its own evaluation. The association, which represents 140,000 members, came under fire when 1,000 of those members signed an open letter criticising its decision to publicly critique the review due to its unsubstantiated recommendations. In defending its view, the BMA cited a white paper co-authored by founding members of the Integrity Project at Yale Law School and a team of international scientists and physicians specialising in gender-affirming medical care. which provided a damning evidence-based critique of Hilary Cass's recommendations. Still, it appears that with publications across the political spectrum united against them, the UK's largest doctors' union and professional body has bowed to external pressure. Oh, I forgot to turn my phone to silent.
No, I made that noise.
Oh.
I'm a delightful
bird. That was a
bird.
good impression. And incidentally, I just wanted to point out, for those who think that The Guardian Australia is on your side, they took part in this pile on the BMA as well. So...
Not necessarily the leftist lean that it is accused of.
No, I don't think so, not these days. So today we were going to have a general discussion around a couple of things, the so-called sex-gender distinction and gender abolition as a concept and what we think about that, whether it's a good thing, bad thing, and why. I thought maybe we could have a little preamble before we go into the next bracket of music. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I'd love to kick off by hearing a little more about our guest this morning, Ludo.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'm a trans-masc, non-binary person who's been living in McGangan for a couple of years now, and feel I've learnt a lot about the trans community by living in a city where I get to meet lots of cool trans people.
And you're active with
McGangan People's Pride.
McGangan People's Pride, and you're an artist too, right?
Yeah, I've helped out with just some visual design things with MPP, and mostly I'm unemployed, but when I pretend I have a job, I'm an artist.
Well, tell me about your practice. Tell me about your visual arts practice. Oh my God, art card is taking over Tranzmission once again.
I draw mostly just kind of lefty propaganda type looking things about my political opinions. Do stuff that's pro-abortion, pro-trans people, pro-decolonization, all that good stuff.
Sounds
I see
good.
you. I've seen you a couple of times at stalls at MPP events.
Yeah, people may have seen my pins around.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
A non-binary person making pins.
So rare, so unique.
Hey man, we're all singing in
the non-binary pin industrial complex. So the reason why I invited you in, Ludo, was because a while ago I posted something in a local trans group about this whole topic, and you chimed in, and we had quite an interaction on there, and it was completely civil, even though we didn't always agree. And I thought that you had some great things to say, so I just thought, let's have that conversation or something like it on air.
Where more people can see it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have terrible news about how many people can see this.
What's that?
We're on radio.
Yeah, well, they're not seeing it, though, at least. They're hearing it.
Amplifying the voices of the trans and gender non-conforming community of Meanjin, Brisbane and beyond.
Tranzmission on 4ZZZ brings you the latest in trans community news, music and events.
Every Tuesday from 9am till 10am.
Join our team of hosts for an hour of celebrating the unique perspectives of the trans community.
Tranzmission, Tuesday mornings from 9am till 10am on 4ZZZ.
So we're going to discuss some potentially contentious issues today. Let's get into it. I thought first maybe we should define our terms so that we all know we're talking about the same thing. So when I talk about...
good.
Yeah. So when I talk about the sex-gender distinction, I noticed, Ludo, that you prefer the term biological sex, I guess, to differentiate it from kind of social sex or something.
Yeah, from, I guess, what I feel is the common usage of the word sex, which refers more to, I believe, like the social construct of gender that we project onto sex rather than, biological sex traits as a group.
And how would you define... So do you have a definition for biological sex, or is it not something you think about that much?
I guess I think of biological sex as the sex characteristics that are associated with reproductive sex, binary sex roles. Yeah. I mostly just think of my biology as biology, and its relation to sex and gender is more nebulous.
So kind of biological sex defined as reproductive organs.
Not necessarily, because I guess my vibes for biological sex are like, it includes your hormones, it might include your height, it includes bone shape, it includes, I don't know, just a lot of things that people don't usually mean when they talk about sex. They usually just mean either like genitals or like your hormone profile, maybe chromosomes if they're weird.
Or the latest definition seems to be, the latest gotcha definition by the so-called gender critical brigade seems to be the large and small gametes thing, which I noticed is what Wikipedia is saying now too. I don't know for how long. Something I read which I thought was apt was in this study that someone linked to me, Trans Women Are Becoming Female by Matilda Carter. So Matilda Carter says that sex is best thought of as a quote-unquote cluster concept consisting of traits that usually, but by no means always, encourage one another's presence. So sex, being a particular sex, is merely a matter of having enough of the traits that in aggregate generate and entail the imposition of their related gender norms. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That's probably a definition I could agree with, but it's not worded in necessarily the clearest way.
No, it's a little confounding, but the cluster concept, I like the idea of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like that vibe.
Okay, cool. And then gender. So I've noticed that in trans circles, often gender is used as shorthand for gender identity. So whereas, like the World Health Organization or folks like that will define gender more in a social sense. And I think that's how you were using it more also when we were talking. I'm not sure. But I generally speak about gender identity, if that's what I'm speaking about. But sometimes I think I shorten it to gender. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, It's definitely very nebulous because, when we talk about things, we are very rarely defining our terms before we have the conversation. We're usually figuring out each other's definitions by having the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Gender is, to me, just a very big nebulous block of associated traits that's very culturally dependent. It can be related to aesthetics. It's mostly related to social roles, I suppose. It can be seen as like a class. It depends on your analysis.
Yeah, so you're kind of going more with the social gender definition, which kind of does seem to be the, let's say, most commonly used definition of gender, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I'm on board with that. The idea that the kind of social biological divide is that's the sex gender divide. If we're defining the terms, to me, and then the gender identity, and then kind of just the gender thing, as you were talking about before, is almost just the social aspect, but the internal external divide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I think gender identity is what's most important to trans folks.
Yeah.
But my feeling is, well, if, because we're going to touch on gender abolition later, well, what happens if you abolish gender and no one has an understanding of gender, then what happens to gender identity as a concept? Can you have gender identity as a concept in that case?
But then aren't you just a person who has certain traits and behaviours and mannerisms that make you feel comfortable in the world? And now there isn't a incorrect way to be, I suppose, to me would be the optimistic take on gender abolition.
Yeah, when trans people talk about gender abolition, I find they're usually talking about not the abolition of gender identity, but the abolition of social gender and legal gender and all of those larger systems that reinforce themselves and coerce people into gendered roles that they wouldn't choose naturally under an uncoercive system.
Totally.
That's true. Like the idea of gender non-conforming cis people, like a butch who is comfortable being a woman, being she, her, and yet often is mistaken for a man, often is harassed in feminine bathrooms.
Or even a butch person who identifies fully as a woman but still uses he, him pronouns, maybe medically transitions, but it looks indistinguishable from a trans man or a cis man, but is a woman.
I guess I think that gender abolition is a utopian idea that I don't really see happening in my lifetime. What do you think about that?
I do feel very similar.
Yeah, 100%. Like, there's definitely a kind of high-minded level of idealized thinking about how the world could be and how we can start to act in our own personal lives and how we treat each other, and the realpolitik of other things. And also, we, each of us, to an individual, you, the listener, are at the mercy of how you are being perceived by other people. What is it? Hell is other people. There is a version of you that lives in my mind that you can't control and isn't you in your totality. And isn't
I've just been watching Evangelion. It's all about that. The transgenders were right.
No!
What was that you were watching?
Evangelion.
Anything but Evangelion.
Let's not talk about Evangelion.
All right, hang on. Back to gender.
Yeah.
Please, you guys. I would to hear your thoughts.
One thought I've often had is that gender is collaborative, right?
Definitely. I definitely feel that.
And that can be a beautiful thing sometimes, but it can be a terrible thing at other times. Because, like for instance, I don't generally identify myself as a woman or a trans woman, even though there's some part of my mind that wishes that I did, but I just don't feel ready to take that leap. Like, I'm a bit new to being open about my gender identity. Like, I made that decision about 4 years ago, and I kind of put it into practice a bit more than 2 years ago. So and I'm pretty old, so I've had a lot of self-conditioning and social conditioning to not think of myself as a woman, and so I'm not quite ready to take that leap. But when a friend, usually it's a cis woman that I'm friends with, will kind of anoint me as a woman, like in their mind I'm a woman, right? And that feels so great, and it kind of helps me to more fully inhabit myself.
Because it's very difficult to tell, what person body combination you are independent of society, because we aren't independent of society.
That's right. And often, as part of my kind of social transition, a big part of it actually is that pretty much every day I will put on makeup, and I don't go over the top with it, but I'll put it on every day, and I'll dress in something that I like, and I'll go out and I'll sit at a cafe, or I'll interact with people, and it helps to remind me. Because if I'm just at home, like in my pajamas or something, I sort of forget, and I just find myself kind of drifting back into my past way of thinking about myself. I talk to myself a bit, and when I'm talking to myself at home, my voice will drop, and I'll kind of lapse back into where I was before.
You are performing gender in a certain way, not for your own inherent sake, but to get that external affirmation of who you are.
No.
That if we don't have a certain, like you were saying, like a collection of behaviours that then can readily communicate to someone else, like, oh, this is feminine, this is a signal that I'm sending to somebody else that I am expecting to be treated, or like I am inviting you to treat me in a certain way. And why would letting your voice sit in a lower, maybe more comfortable range detract from your identity in any way, except that it's an external performance that you are trying to bring people in on the affirmation?
It's not an either-or question. It's like, there's an aspect of that, but it's also, so I remember a line from a novel I read a long time ago: music wants to be listened to. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm a musician, and often I'm at home just playing music by myself. It sounds different when you play music by yourself than if you have an audience, right? And sometimes the audience brings great stuff out of you. And I think it's kind of similar, that being out in the world inspires me to enjoy myself and enjoy my gender identity in a way that I don't so often at home. Like at home, I'm just like, I don't know, making music or whatever, reading or whatever, and I become this genderless entity. And that, look, for some people, being a genderless entity might be ideal, for the gender abolitionists, but for me, that's not.
It doesn't.
It's
feel
not as fun.
It's safe and right.
Well, the voice, for instance, when my voice drops, it doesn't feel more comfortable, it feels less. It feels like, oh, it's that again. It's a big...
It's a habit you haven't broken out of.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few of them. There's a few of them, yeah. Anyway, I've gone off on a personal tangent. Maybe we should have some music. What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Peter Sterling, the only man in the world who's given birth to a child.
Someone might say, oh, you're a bit of a queer. And they'd be right.
So, Ludo, when we were talking on Facebook, you said, I don't like it when even feminists and trans folk act like biological sex represents an inherently truer reality than social gender.
Yeah, I do think that.
Yeah. So, truer reality, I thought that made me think, because I don't think I think of it as a truer reality. I just think of it as another reality.
Yeah, it's, my biological sex or my sex characteristics that are associated with, hormones and genitals, etc. Those, I can understand why they're important to people, especially trans people, but I don't think that, the validity of gender is stored in, aligning trans people's biological sex with a acceptable vision of female biological sex or male biological sex. I think that trans people are what they are more philosophically than, biologically.
And so you also said that lived gender as experienced publicly and socially makes more sense to record than either gender identity or biological sex.
Yeah, because as far as the government is concerned, I can be non-binary, I can be a man, but my personal identity and how I relate to those terms doesn't really matter, but it matters if, I want to take advantage of sex-segregated spaces, that someone who lives as a woman and identifies as a woman can access female segregated spaces regardless of their biology.
Yeah, totally. So this brings me to why I started this conversation on Facebook, which I was a bit sneaky about at the time because I'd already posted in a different group and I'd made it clear what I was talking about and everyone just piled on me. It was about the Tickle versus Giggle case and everyone wanted to celebrate and I was just sounding a note of caution because in that case the judge kind of reached a judgment at the end where he said that the court accepted that it was possible to change sex, that this was based on a legal precedent going back 30 years. And meanwhile, in court, Roxanne Tickle's lawyer had made a point of stating that Roxanne Tickle had had bottom surgery.
Oh, okay. I see the edges of the trap here as they start to emerge.
And I was like, but then this was widely reported. So The Guardian reported this, made a point out of the fact that Roxanne Tickle had had gender confirmation surgery. And we even reported it here on this show. It wasn't me, but it was another announcer that read that off too. And I'm like, we are discussing Roxanne Tickle's genitals, and we are using that as part of the evidence towards why she should have access to women's spaces. And I thought that self-ID had done away with that.
Because she has a state-sanctioned vagina, which is an insane thing to become a topic of any kind of public-facing conversation.
Exactly, and it seemed to me like it was I should qualify it by saying that she's born in New South Wales and they still haven't updated the self-ID laws there. But this became this was reported worldwide. And I'm just thinking, look, if I was an ignorant cis person and I was reading this, the takeaway message for me is, so you can change your sex by having...
As long as you do that.
As long as you do that, and then you get to change your marker on your birth certificate, and then you get your rights.
As long as the government has come in and intercepted and had the bureaucracy applied to your life.
Yeah.
And then and only then you can move through the world with any kind of validity or dignity.
Yeah. Totally. And that really troubles me.
Yeah, I worry when trans rights are built upon the same systems of colonialism and legalism that produced the gender binary and its problems and patriarchy and all that.
That is a fantastic point.
Rather than moving beyond that in some way.
Well, we saw this with the marriage debate. We saw this, there is this urge in marginalised groups to either assimilate or destroy. And the marriage rights movement was definitely an assimilate. We can be normal as well, We'd like to serve in the military
we can have a nice little wedding in a church and it'll be very acceptable and very polite.
Whereas, is that what we want to really uphold in the long term? Or do we want to assimilate, or do we want to destroy?
That's an interesting point, because another link that I wanted to bring into this is this Gender Nihilism, an Anti-Manifesto by Alison Escalante. I'll just read a little quote from it if I can. "We have heard the suggestions that non-binary identity, trans identity, and queer identity might be able to create a subversion of gender. This cannot be the case. In staking our claim on identity labels of non-binary, we find ourselves always again caught back in the realm of gender. To take on identity in a rejection of the gender binary is still to accept the binary as a point of reference. In the resistance to it, one only reconstructs the normative status of the binary."
You can be a man or a woman or the third one.
Yeah, you can be a man or a woman or something else, and the something else has often been used as a category to lump in even binary trans people, people who very publicly identify as fully female or male are still considered a weird third thing.
Oh, totally. I'm sure both of you have had the wonderful phenomenon of introducing your trans friend and being like, her name is Hayley, and then they go, oh, they're very nice.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. If your pronouns are she, they, or they, them, best way, as a trans woman, best way is to just say you're like she, her. Everyone will they, them you anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I find a bit the opposite. If I'm in cis spaces, I find that when I try to introduce nuance into the conversation, they don't understand. So, and as I said, my cis female friends will refer to me as she and call me a woman, even though I've said that I don't identify as a woman. But I guess they know that there's this kind of loophole where I am actually flattered when they refer to me that way, so it's okay. But I think it's also that they can't see outside of the binary as easily as...
Yeah, they can't imagine affirming your femininity and womanhood without you being a binary woman.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think it's more just knee-jerk than that, is that you have a feminine haircut and you have flowers on your shirt, and your face looks pretty in a way that I think you might be wearing some makeup right now. I don't want to assume, but
yeah, well, I told you I wear it every day.
So there we go. So there we have tick, 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 she.
Yeah.
Pretty hair, flowers, makeup. My knee-jerk brain goes, it's a woman.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a first world problem, but I would like people to recognise that I'm trans feminine, like that. I can be feminine and not
feel very
be a woman.
That's so real.
My identity with manhood is not an identity with manhood as defined by cis terms. It's an identity with masculinity and manhood as defined by queer people.
Yeah, totally.
The subversive versions of gender that we've been able to create and proliferate and experiment with.
Yeah, I get that totally.
But again, hell is other people. We cannot explain ourselves into being understood. And I guess this is where, at the end of the day, I think trans people are going to continue to aspire to passing for the societal confirmation. Sorry.
And if only for safety reasons.
And what a valid reason.
Yeah.
But that is something that, because sometimes I'll prowl around on Reddit. I don't very often post there, but every now and then I'll read stuff there just to kind of, I don't know, keep an eye on what's going on. And I find there are a lot of what sound to me like young trans people who are really worried about not being able to pass. And it makes me feel really sad, because I'm like, oh wow, we haven't really come that far, have we? Why is this such a I can't accept that it's just for their own personal benefit all the time. I think it is mostly a safety concern and a fear of being ostracized in society.
Yeah, a fear of being seen as the trans and being seen as the other, therefore being seen as being perceived in the same way that trans people are projected as in society and in popular media is, it's not a flattering image.
Not at all. And I guess a lot of young trans people are very much online, and I mean, at least my clients that I work with are often quite introverted, don't get out all that much, so they're seeing more the media and internet portrayal of themselves, which is the most negative portrayal there is.
It's the most idealized and the most normalized version of anything.
We got the anime cat girl and the worst cringe compilation you've ever seen. There's your role models.
Oh, ouch.
Sorry, I'm also incredibly online, and it is a terrible place to be.
It's an interesting place to be.
Yeah.
The discourses, it's part of why I really like having conversations with trans people about our differing ideas on gender, but online it can get a bit heated and a bit personal in a way that, you know, I'm not trying to invalidate people. I'm fine with self-identity and whatever people imagine themselves as, and like what they therefore then want to present to the world. But I also want to talk about, you know, gender as a system and gender as
Totally. Yeah. And I really appreciated the way that you were able to have that talk with me online without ever setting me up like with a straw man or making me the enemy or anything like that, which I find happens so often.
Yeah, and it's just not helpful to disagreements or conversations to treat another person as if they are stupid and malicious.
No, until you've worked out that they really are.
Oh, yeah. Which you can tell, and a lot of people are trying to be, especially online.
Yeah, totally. But, you know, like, let's face it, not only is the trans community not a monolith, but, like, we are so diverse in our attitudes to especially this topic, I think, like these topics that affect us the most as trans people.
Yeah, because there are many trans experiences. There's the trans experience of people where in countries where medical transition isn't possible. There's the trans experience in just anywhere that isn't like in the imperial core, which is vastly, vastly different from our discussions of our needs as trans people.
Oh, 100%. And even the kind of, you know, prevalence of the self as opposed to, you know, how you are existing in a collective is...
Yeah.
Your mindset shifts depending on where you grew up, depending on what language you speak. We are going to need another hour.
We're pretty much out of time, yeah. So thanks so much for coming in, Ludo. So great to have this conversation with you. And thanks for being here, Liz.
Thanks. So if people want to find the work that you're doing, Ludo, where can they track you down?
You can find me at McGanjan People's Pride events and online at Pinko Pansy. I make art. I haven't been posting a lot, but I promise I still do it.
I feel that.
Thank you so much for listening to Tranzmission. See you next Tuesday, 9 to 10 a.m. on 4ZZZ.